I like to say that bees saved my life. And so I've dedicated my practice as an artist and as an educator to saving the bees. One in every 3 bites of food that we eat is pollinated by bees. And a lot of the vegetables and grains that cattle eat and livestock eat for our meats is also pollinated by bees. So a lot of the food would be not here if the bees disappear. So that's why Einstein and Rudolf Steiner said that if the bees disappear, we'll have 4 years left of life on Earth as a human species.
Society without bees would be pretty adversely affected in terms of the amount of food we'd have access to. Food variety would be extremely limited.
There are factors that threaten the health of bees and threaten the health of humans as well. Those factors are toxins in the environment. So those include pesticides, Roundup that people spray in their yards, pesticides genetically introduced into plants. So the bees eat those and their immune systems are compromised. Maybe they can't find their way back to the hive. So lack of diversity in the food supply is another factor. The more we have these big plots of land that are all the same crop, that's only food for bees for about 2 weeks out of the year when that crop has pollen and nectar. And then the rest of the year it's a food desert. Climate change. So we're seeing the weather shift dramatically. I've not seen this happen in my lifetime, where we have an 80-degree day in February, right? So when that happens with honeybees, inside the hive, over the winter, the honeybees cluster around the queen and they keep the hive at 42 degrees. When they break cluster in the spring, that means the queen starts laying eggs and they have to keep the hive at 92 degrees, which is very, very warm for those little baby bees, right? So if we have a couple of days in February where it's 80 degrees, the honeybees will think, oh, it's spring. And the queen will start laying eggs, and then they have to keep the hive at 92 degrees for the rest of February through March and April. And they can't sustain that. So they run out of honey, they run out of fuel for that, and they starve to death.
For me, it would be sad just not having that relationship that I do now with the bees, where I can go out to a flower in the morning and there'll be a sleeping bumblebee and I can pet the bumblebee and really have this little moment of connection where the bee kind of turns over and looks at me and goes about its business for the day. And it's very sweet, and I think there's just a natural connection with other species that it brings a richness to our life that we wouldn't have otherwise.
My name's Emily Putoff, and I'm co-founder of the Hudson Valley Bee Habitat. I'm also an artist and an educator at SUNY New Paltz, where I teach sculpture and I head the sculpture program. And I work on sustainability initiatives there, too.
I'm Jen Wooden. I'm an artist and a co-founder of the Hudson Valley Bee Habitat. My background in education is in the arts, specifically in ceramics, and I've done a lot of different type of art projects over the years and some teaching over the years, and now I'm actually a full-time artist.
I was supposed to be a biologist because I had a lot of AP credits from high school, and then I took a 3D design class and just knew I was a sculptor, and so that sort of changed my life, and I've been sculpting ever since. But it's interesting because now biology and sculpture is merging back together again.
I was super keen on engineering at the time, so I just kept that going. But then I actually ended up finding my way to ceramics a little bit later, and there's little seeds planted along the way. Sometimes we don't even know what's there until a lot later when you meet somebody who's an artist and they inspire you again. Just at different points it can be the right time to explore it. And I think for me it was somewhere after engineering school I jumped back in and found some great teachers and really reconnected with art and pursued it.
I discovered honeybees by accident. I wanted to have an assignment in sustainability for my sculpture class, my basic sculpture class, for them to do a project about sustainability. And so I randomly picked bees because they were in the news, but I didn't know why they were dying or suffering or why there was this thing called colony collapse disorder. I just heard about it. That was the first spark of inspiration for the bee habitat. And I decided I needed to start keeping honeybees. At the same time, I had a traumatic experience that I was suffering from a lot of stress and anxiety from. And I found that keeping honeybees was a way to heal from that stress and anxiety. So when you approach a honeybee hive, when you go into a hive, you have to be very in tune with how you're feeling, what sort of energy you're putting out, and what is your relationship to that hive. So if you go into a hive and you're bringing fear and anxiety, they're going to sense that and they're going to react to your fear and anxiety and say, get out of my home, get out of my nursery, kind of thing. So it was a way for me to check back into my body, be present, and be with the bees. And something magical happens in the beehive. There's this scent, there's this hum, and it's really amazing, relaxing experience when you're in tune with the bees. So this is a solitary bee habitat that we designed to be 3D printed. The front of the designs, this is for the humans. We wanted it to be very visually appealing, so humans would want to put this up at their houses and help the bee population survive by putting these habitats up. And so these are the caps that we've designed with holes for the bees to enter. And the cap provides protection from the rain and birds. The process for making the bee habitats, we're making bee habitats for solitary bees. And so solitary bees are different than honeybees. They make up 90% of the bee population, and no one ever thinks about solitary bees because they live solitarily and they nest in solitary areas, and they don't live together like honeybees in colonies. They don't have a queen, and they don't make honey. So humans aren't that interested in what they're doing, but they're really critical pollinators, and they're 90% of the bee population. Solitary bees like various size tubes to lay their eggs. They lay either in the ground in tubes, and those are ground nesting bees, or they lay in cavities. And so we're designing these for the cavity nesting bees.
It needs to be protected all winter and in through the spring until it's warm enough for them to hatch and leave. And in order for that to occur, we need to provide good habitat. So that could be as simple as something the size of a birdhouse that is specifically designed for native wild bees. We are working with the Native American Scene Sanctuary. Next spring, we will actually build an arbor for that sanctuary that they'll be used as an entry point, so that whenever folks come up to the sanctuary, they have a gateway in which they check in with themselves and learn about where they're at in that moment, so that they can actually step into the sanctuary with intention and an open heart into what's happening there.
Our biggest challenge with our work is, overall in the Hudson Valley Bee Habitat, is the fear of bees.
Helping people feel comfortable with bees. We have a long-standing understanding culturally that bees are out to sting us, and I think what we're trying to do is help people understand how, if you can really connect with each individual situation, get to know the bees that are there, get to know how that affects your area or the plants in your area. That education is one aspect to help people feel comfortable around bees again, and how to behave around bees rather than agitate a situation.
Hornets and wasps, people call them bees, and hornets and wasps are very aggressive because they can sting you multiple times, whereas honeybees have barbed stingers and they die if they sting you. And so they really decide whether they want to hurt you or not, whereas hornets and wasps don't, and they're carnivorous and stuff. So part of our work is just educating about bees and their importance and their role, and transforming that fear into a kind of wonder and an appreciation. We as humans are completely disconnected from our food supply, from our environment, even from ourselves sometimes. We're almost alienated from our own bodies in a lot of ways. So our work is really about that idea of reconnection of humans to the environment, to their communities, to their own selves. So that's at the core of our work, is that reconnection, and then we can start to do very tangible things to help save the bees.